What if I told you that the government might be preparing for something big, something they're not telling us? Hidden in plain sight, deep within the shelves of your local Walmart, are everyday food items that the government has been secretly stockpiling. For what? Is it for an upcoming crisis? A food shortage? Or something even more unsettling? In today's video, we're diving deep into 10 Walmart foods that the government is allegedly hoarding, and trust me, some of them will shock you. Well, that's exactly what the government is trying to prevent. For decades, governments around the world, including the US, have been quietly stockpiling food. Because in times of crisis, whether it's war, economic collapse, natural disasters, or even pandemics, a stable food supply can mean the difference between order and chaos. But here's where things get interesting. The US government has a long history of secretly stockpiling food. One of the strangest examples? The Great Cheese Stockpile of the 1980s. Yes, you heard that right. Back in the 80s, the US government bought up billions of pounds of surplus cheese from farmers to stabilize the dairy industry. They stored it in underground warehouses, creating what some called a cheese mountain. Eventually, this led to the creation of government cheese, a processed product given out to low-income families. But that was just one instance. What about today? With rising concerns over food shortages, supply chain disruptions, and economic instability, stockpiling isn't just a historical relic, it's happening right now. And Walmart? It plays a much bigger role than most people realize. Long shelf life. First and foremost, shelf life is everything. Foods that spoil quickly are useless in long-term storage. That's why most stockpiled items have a lifespan of years, sometimes even decades. Think canned goods, dried grains, and freeze-dried meals, foods that can sit in storage without going bad. 2. Nutritional value. Stockpiling isn't just about survival, it's about sustenance. The USDA prioritizes foods packed with protein, healthy fats, and essential vitamins to keep people nourished during a crisis. That's why you'll often see canned beans, peanut butter, and powdered milk on emergency food lists. 3. Ease of storage. Stockpiled foods need to be compact, lightweight, and easy to store in massive quantities. Dried rice, pasta, and powdered foods are perfect because they take up less space and can be transported efficiently. 4. Widespread consumer acceptance. Here's something you might not have thought about. The government doesn't just stockpile food, it stockpiles food that people will actually eat. That means familiar, everyday foods that the average person can cook and enjoy, even in a crisis. No exotic or experimental meals, just reliable, household staples. So, with these strict guidelines in mind, which foods has the government been secretly storing from Walmart shelves? The answers might surprise you. Let's break down the top 10 stockpiled foods, starting with one of the most common, yet overlooked, survival essentials. 1. Canned beans. If there's one food that quietly fills government stockpiles without anyone noticing, it's canned beans. Because this humble pantry staple is one of the ultimate survival foods. First, let's talk about nutrition. Canned beans are packed with protein and fiber, making them a high-energy, gut-filling food that keeps you full for hours. In an emergency, where every calorie counts, beans provide a steady source of energy, without the blood sugar crashes you'd get from processed foods. Then there's the shelf life. Unlike fresh produce, which spoils in days, canned beans can last up to 5 years, or even longer if stored properly. That's exactly why the government loves them. They require zero refrigeration, minimal storage space, and stay edible for years. Perfect for long-term crisis planning. And here's something most people don't know, canned beans aren't just stockpiled for national emergencies. They've been a part of food aid programs, military rations, and even FEMA's emergency supply chain. In fact, during past disasters like Hurricane Katrina, massive stockpiles of beans were distributed to affected communities, proving just how essential they are in times of crisis. But what's even more interesting? Canned beans are one of the first foods to disappear from store shelves when panic buying kicks in. This means if you see them quietly vanishing from Walmart aisles, it might be a sign that something big is coming. So, what's next on our list of secretly stockpiled foods? You might be surprised at just how common it is. 2. Rice. If there's one food that has fed civilizations for centuries, it's rice. But did you know that it's also one of the most stockpiled foods in US government storage? Rice is the ultimate survival staple. It's lightweight, easy to transport, and incredibly cheap to buy in bulk. But the real reason it's stored in massive quantities? It lasts forever. Properly stored, white rice can stay edible for 30 years or more, making it one of the longest-lasting foods in emergency reserves. But shelf life isn't the only reason the government loves rice. It's also one of the most calorie-dense foods per dollar. A single 20-pound bag of rice contains tens of thousands of calories, enough to sustain a person for weeks. That's why rice is a key food in military rations, disaster relief programs, and global food aid initiatives. And here's something most people don't realize. When food shortages hit, rice prices skyrocket. In 2008, a global food crisis led to panic buying and price surges, forcing stores like Walmart and Costco to limit rice purchases. Could history repeat itself? Some experts think it's already happening as global supply chains face growing pressure. So, the next time you see massive bags of rice disappearing from Walmart's shelves, you might want to ask yourself, who's really buying it all? And that brings us to another food that's vanishing fast, one that's packed with protein and never needs refrigeration. 3. Peanut butter. It's creamy, packed with protein, and lasts for years without refrigeration. But what most people don't know is that peanut butter is one of the most stockpiled foods in U.S. emergency reserves. Because it checks all the boxes for survival food. Peanut butter is nutrient-dense, offering a perfect mix of healthy fats, protein, and calories in a compact package. In a crisis, when fresh meat and dairy become unavailable, peanut butter becomes a vital protein source, which is exactly why it's a staple in government food aid programs and military rations. And then there's its incredible shelf life. Unlike most perishable protein sources, unopened peanut butter can last up to 5 years, sometimes longer if stored properly. That makes it an ideal choice for long-term food storage, FEMA emergency kits, and even classified military survival caches. Here's another little-known fact. During past economic downturns, peanut butter has been a key food in government assistance programs. In the 2020 pandemic, when grocery stores ran out of essentials, peanut butter was one of the first foods to disappear from shelves, because both consumers and government agencies were quietly stockpiling it. So, if you start seeing peanut butter shortages at Walmart, it could mean one of two things: either people are panic buying, or the government is preparing for something big. And speaking of high-protein, long-lasting foods, the next stockpiled item might surprise you. It comes straight from the ocean. Canned tuna. It's lightweight, packed with protein, and has been a military staple for decades. But here's what most people don't realize. Canned tuna is one of the most heavily stockpiled foods in government reserves. Because in a crisis, protein is one of the hardest nutrients to get. Fresh meat spoils quickly, and refrigeration can't be relied on during emergencies. That's where canned tuna comes in. It's shelf-stable, high in protein, and lasts for years. A single can of tuna contains 20+ grams of protein, making it one of the most efficient, space-saving survival foods. It also provides omega-3 fatty acids, which are essential for brain function and overall health, something that's often overlooked in emergency food supplies. But here's where it gets interesting. Canned tuna has a deep connection to government stockpiling. The U.S. military has used it in ration kits for decades, and agencies like FEMA and the USDA have included it in emergency food programs. During supply chain disruptions, tuna is one of the first foods to be quietly bought in bulk, often before the public even notices. And if you remember the early days of the 2020 pandemic, you might recall how fast canned tuna disappeared from Walmart shelves. Was it just panic buying, or was something bigger happening behind the scenes? The next food on our list has an even longer shelf life, and it's a survival staple found in nearly every household. 5. Powdered milk. It doesn't need refrigeration, lasts for years, and can replace fresh dairy in an instant. Yet, most people overlook powdered milk, a food that the government has been stockpiling for decades. Why is powdered milk so important? Because in a long-term crisis, fresh milk is one of the first things to disappear. Dairy products spoil fast, and when supply chains break down, stores can't restock. That's why powdered milk is a survival essential. It provides all the benefits of fresh milk, without the risk of spoilage. The shelf life? Unopened, it can last 20 years or more when stored properly. That's why it's a key part of FEMA's emergency reserves, military rations, and USDA food assistance programs. But here's something most people don't know. The U.S. government has a history of buying up massive amounts of powdered milk. In fact, during the dairy surpluses of the 1980s, the government purchased so much of it that they had to store it in underground warehouses. Some of that stockpile was later turned into what became known as government cheese. And when supply chain issues hit, powdered milk is one of the first things to vanish from Walmart shelves. Could that be happening again? Some signs say yes. The next food on our list is even more crucial for survival, because it's one of the only foods that never goes bad. Honey. Imagine a food so powerful that it can last for thousands of years without going bad. Sounds impossible, right? Well, that's exactly what makes honey one of the most valuable stockpiled foods, and a secret weapon in government reserves. Unlike most survival foods, honey never spoils. Archaeologists have found jars of honey in ancient Egyptian tombs that are still perfectly edible after over 3,000 years. That means it can be stored indefinitely, making it one of the best long-term food sources in any crisis. But honey isn't just about shelf life, it's also a natural medicine. It has antibacterial and antifungal properties, making it useful for treating wounds, soothing sore throats, and even boosting immunity. That's why honey has been included in military survival kits and emergency medical supplies for generations. And then there's the energy factor. Honey is a quick source of natural sugars, providing an instant energy boost when food is scarce. That's why it's often used by soldiers, survivalists, and emergency responders who need fast, reliable nutrition. But here's where things get really interesting. Honey is disappearing from Walmart shelves faster than ever. Beekeepers and food industry experts have been warning about honey shortages due to declining bee populations and supply chain issues. Is the government stockpiling honey behind the scenes? Some experts believe it's already happening. The next food on our list is just as surprising, and it's something most people completely overlook when preparing for a crisis. 7. Oats. It's cheap, packed with nutrients, and can last over 30 years if stored properly. But here's something most people don't realize. Oats are one of the most heavily stockpiled foods in government reserves. Because oats are one of the most efficient survival foods on the planet. They're rich in fiber, protein, and essential vitamins, making them a powerhouse for energy and nutrition. Unlike refined grains that cause energy crashes, oats provide slow-burning fuel, keeping people full for hours, a crucial factor in survival situations. Then there's the shelf life. Uncooked oats stored in airtight containers can last decades, meaning they're perfect for long-term government storage and emergency food kits. That's why oats have been included in military rations, food aid programs, and FEMA's emergency food stockpiles for years. And here's something even more surprising. Oats are disappearing faster than ever. Global food shortages, rising grain prices, and supply chain disruptions have led to record-high demand. In fact, major food suppliers have warned about oat shortages and price spikes, yet somehow, the government always seems to have plenty on hand. So, if you notice oatmeal shelves at Walmart looking emptier than usual, it might not just be because of health-conscious consumers. Something bigger could be at play. But the next food on our list? It's even more essential, because it's one of the most calorie-dense survival foods ever stockpiled. The pasta. It's cheap, lightweight, and can feed a family for weeks. But here's something most people don't realize. Pasta is one of the most stockpiled foods in government reserves. Because pound for pound, pasta is one of the most calorie-dense foods available. A single 1-pound box contains over 1,600 calories, making it an efficient way to store massive amounts of energy in a small space. That's exactly why it's been a staple in emergency food supplies, military rations, and global food aid programs for decades. But it's not just about calories. Pasta is also one of the easiest foods to prepare. Just add boiling water, and in minutes, you have a meal that's both filling and versatile. No refrigeration, no complicated cooking, just pure survival fuel. And here's where things get interesting. Pasta has been disappearing from store shelves during every major crisis. When the 2020 pandemic hit, pasta was one of the first foods to sell out in Walmart and other grocery stores. Because both the public and government agencies were scrambling to stockpile it. So, if you see pasta shortages happening again, it might not be a coincidence. Someone, or something, could be preparing for the next big event. And speaking of essential survival foods, the next item on our list is even more critical, because it's the backbone of nearly every emergency meal. 9. Flour. Bread, pasta, tortillas, almost every staple food starts with one key ingredient, flour. And that's exactly why the government quietly stockpiles massive amounts of it. Flour isn't just a pantry essential, it's a survival necessity. With just flour and water, you can make basic survival bread, a food that has sustained civilizations for centuries. It's also incredibly versatile, forming the base for everything from biscuits to dumplings to thickening soups. But what makes it ideal for stockpiling? Shelf life. While regular all-purpose flour lasts up to a year, Specialty survival flours like whole wheat or white flour stored in airtight containers can stay fresh for years. Even better, flour alternatives like powdered wheat berries can last over 30 years, which is why they're part of government emergency reserves. And here's something most people don't know: flour shortages have already happened. During the 2020 lockdowns, Walmart and other major stores ran out of flour almost overnight. Was it just consumer panic, or was there something bigger happening behind the scenes? Some experts believe governments and large institutions were quietly stockpiling wheat and flour in preparation for food supply disruptions. So, if you ever notice flour disappearing from Walmart shelves, it might be time to start asking questions. Is something coming that we're not being told about? And that brings us to the final food on our list. One that's so essential, it's been used as a survival staple for thousands of years. Salt. It's cheap, lasts forever, and has been used as currency in ancient civilizations. But here's something you might not know: salt is one of the most strategically stockpiled foods by governments around the world. Because salt isn't just a seasoning, it's a survival necessity. Without enough salt, the human body can't function properly. It regulates hydration, supports nerve function, and even helps preserve food, a crucial skill in any long-term crisis. And that's exactly why the US government keeps massive reserves of salt. Not just for food, but also for military use, medical supplies, and even industrial applications. During wars and economic downturns, salt shortages have been known to trigger panic, and governments have made sure they never run out. But there's another reason salt is so heavily stockpiled: it never expires. Unlike other survival foods, salt doesn't go bad, making it the perfect emergency supply. That's why it's included in military rations, FEMA food kits, and global relief efforts. And if you think salt shortages could never happen, think again. During the 2020 pandemic, some regions saw a surprising drop in salt availability. Was it just supply chain issues, or was something bigger happening? Some experts believe that large-scale government stockpiling may have played a role. So, the next time you see Walmart running low on salt, you might want to ask yourself, what are they preparing for? And that concludes our list of the 10 Walmart foods secretly stockpiled by the government. But the real question is, what do they know that we don't? What do you think? Is the government stockpiling food for good reasons, or are they keeping something from us? Let us know in the comments. And if you found this video eye-opening, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Because next time, it might not just be food disappearing from shelves, it might be something even bigger.